Yesterday, the President of the United States tweeted this image. A picture of himself with the legend. He's on a mission from God, and nothing can stop what's coming. Utterly bizarre and weird world we're in these days. Well, anyway, that post was aging pretty badly, almost as it was being posted, because the US Court on International Trade has blocked Trump's mad barrage of tariffs, finding that he simply doesn't have the authority to just go around slapping them on a whim on the entire world. Since this orchestrated mayhem was what was kindly referred to as a key plank of Trump's economic policy, this is an enormous reversal. It potentially leaves him looking utterly humiliated in front of all the countries that he had been relentlessly bullying for the last 2 months. In fact, if this judgment holds, it could just be that the 28th of May will come to be known by historians by a suitable name, something to symbolise its importance. Can't think what that name might be.
Liberation Day.
But let's hold off for a moment, because, as we know, actions provoke reactions, and this could end up being the inciting incident that sees the Trump administration cross the biggest line of all. We'll come to that in a moment. First of all, what just happened? Well, Trump's entire rationale for why he could single-handedly throw the world economic system into turmoil and single-handedly be responsible for an expected worldwide decline in economic growth and extremely hard times for some countries in particular, and how he could do all of that at a stroke with no let or hindrance, no oversight or challenge whatsoever. That was because he had single-handedly declared an emergency. This was a supposed economic emergency because the United States economy, which might be worth noting was the most successful in the world at the time, was in such a bad way that it constituted a crisis. This sat alongside several other national emergencies that he called at the same time, such as an energy emergency and a fentanyl emergency. The redesignation of problems as crises was a nakedly transparent way of claiming executive authority to take unilateral actions via executive orders, thereby sidestepping how the system's supposed to work under the Constitution of the United States. It enabled him to invoke, in this case, the International Emergency Economic Powers Act, claiming that this would permit him to impose tariffs as he saw fit. Now, generally, tariffing power is specifically reserved for Congress, a body with many flaws, let's face it, but nevertheless a deliberative body where at least the likely consequences of actions can get debated and explored before measures are passed. Instead, Trump sidestepped that and just started pinging massive tariffs at every country in the world like a toddler with a water pistol. And Congress showed its flaws in full profile by mostly just sitting back and watching him do it. Well, the Court of International Trade has ruled that that is beyond the President's authority, because the International Emergency Economic Powers Act doesn't even mention tariffs. And the President's conduct was held to, quote, exceed any authority granted to the President by that Act. And the court said this: the court does not pass upon the wisdom or likely effectiveness of the President's use of tariffs as leverage. That use is impermissible, not because it's unwise or ineffective, but because federal law does not allow it. They declared that the tariffs imposed under the Act were done so illegally, so therefore they must be struck down, and it gave the administration 10 days to complete the process of doing so. Unsurprisingly, the Trump administration instantly filed an appeal, and you would expect that should they lose that appeal, this one will go straight to the Supreme Court. For now, though, Trump's playtime bullying strategy is left, to all intents and purposes, in complete and utter disarray. Because all of those negotiations his team has been conducting with countries while there was a supposed 90-day pause on the punitive tariffs that he'd slapped onto them, well, all of those countries are now wondering whether Trump's leverage has just evaporated into thin air. They won't know for sure, not until the appeals process has been exhausted, but they're certainly not going to be in a hurry to come to a deal. Now, it doesn't affect certain tariffs that were brought in on a different legal device, such as tariffs on aluminium and steel, but there's no doubt for now that Trump is left looking somewhat foolish and maybe you might say impotent. If you're going to attack the whole world because you believe you have the ability to push them all around, you're going to find you made a major mistake if it turns out you don't have that power and you've antagonized them for no good purpose. Because one thing that's clear, aforementioned whole world is now engaging on long-term processes to reduce its exposure to the United States. Countries are working to form trade alliances with each other to be more friendly than they'd previously felt would be wise to do so with countries like China, and so on. Well, none of those things are going to suddenly stop just because of this ruling, because the US has shown itself to be hostile and erratic, so the damage has been done. But in the short term, if Trump is prevented from being able to deliver on his bullying, then he is nevertheless still left looking impotent, a figure of ridicule, in a way that he really won't enjoy. And we know he won't enjoy that because one journalist yesterday asked him about the taco trade label that has been much discussed around the world in recent months. Indeed, I've been mentioning it here, TACO standing for Trump Always Chickens Out. He slaps big tariffs on, but then he pulls back as soon as there's significant pushback. If it's not a thing, it's certainly true that it currently stands as a consistently successful predictor of his behaviour. Unsurprisingly, none of Trump's team have ever had the courage to draw this label to his attention. So he claimed, hearing it for the first time from this reporter. And he was furious, calling it the nastiest question he'd ever been asked and attacking the reporter for the impertinence of doing so. I'm sure there must be an old Chinese proverb or something out there suggesting that if you have that thinner skin, maybe don't pick a fight with the entire world. If not, well, I expect there soon will be. On one level, this ruling could end up saving Trump from himself, for all his bruised ego will tell him otherwise. After all, it will, to some degree, protect the United States economy from the worst effects of this anarchic tariffs gameplay that he's been engaged on. And he will no doubt, given that some negative effects are already baked in on account of the chaos that we've seen so far, he will blame those problems on the fact that he was blocked by the courts, rather than because he did a stupid thing. But that depends on the courts all the way up the chain upholding the ruling. And then we get to the point where this could be the big moment of danger for the United States, the catalyst that brings about the final crossing of the Rubicon, if you will. Because, look, there's a moment in the great novel, The Lord of the Flies, where the children have been stranded on the desert island, and the child who will become the leading bully starts throwing stones in the direction of the kid who becomes the first leading target of bullying. And at that point, he throws the stones kind of in his direction, but it's like there's an invisible barrier around the kid, because civilization still applies. The taboo around actually injuring somebody is still there. Later, of course, that line gets well and truly crossed. Right now, the Trump administration has been casually hurling stones at the judiciary in exactly the same way. And so we saw immediately in the wake of this ruling, White House spokesman Kush Desai came in with the usual refrain, "It is not for unelected judges to decide how to properly address a national emergency." MAGA mouthpiece Charlie Kirk said, "With activist judges, what's even the point of having a president?" It's worth noting that the panel of 3 judges included one nominated by Trump himself, one nominated by Ronald Reagan, as well as one nominated by President Obama. They were unanimous in their ruling. The question becomes this: if the reversal reaches the Supreme Court and gets upheld there, Will this finally be the prompt that gets the administration pursuing the logical outcome of all of its anti-judicial statements? Because this isn't some minor detail of implementation. This reversal goes right to the heart of Trump's modus operandi, the heart of his power. He's been attempting to run what some have called an international criminal extortion gang from the Oval Office. Such operations, motivated by such sentiments, don't tend to go quietly into the good night at the sign of the first obstacle. It's not the only part of his economic platform that is getting pushback as well. It seems as though his major tax cuts and spending bill that has now reached the Senate, that is similarly going to have a tough time. It yesterday prompted Elon Musk to attack it directly on the entirely obvious grounds that it shows up his entire Doge operation as having been a complete waste of time. But several senators are also not happy about the massive increase in the deficit that it will actually likely result in. So if that struggles and the tariffs get neutered, what exactly does Trump have left? So maybe this will be the moment when he would lash out and seek to push back against the judicial branch. Now, technically, he could do what Biden once considered and rejected: increasing the size of the Supreme Court, stacking it with loyalists who will simply rubber stamp whatever he wants, or maybe put pressure on existing conservative judges to step down to make way for others who will do what their conscience means that they won't. After all, yes, he appointed several justices, but they were legally qualified and they actually care about upholding the Constitution sufficiently to push back against the most egregious of his indulgences in any case. Well, he's filled all the other senior jobs of his cabinet and top tiers of government with patently unqualified loyalists, and those that needed to go through approval hearings managed to do so. So why wouldn't he seek to take the same approach here? I mean, he could just try to ignore the ruling and carry on in the spirit of "the Chief Justice has made his ruling, now let him enforce it." But since the operation of tariffs requires agencies to execute the policies at the borders, it's hard to know if they would do so, knowing that it had explicitly been ruled as unlawful. If it turns out that the taboo is too strong, the Trump administration is willing to push all the levers it can in an authoritarian direction, but it's not got the courage or the will to actually break the system, to go full-on dictatorship, then the change will quickly become obvious. We will watch as power starts ebbing away from Donald Trump, as lawmakers in Congress become more and more emboldened and assertive, and Trump's lame duck period in the presidency will have well and truly begun, rather early in his term. While he'll be able to put himself at the centre of things in various creative ways, particularly in terms of foreign policy, he won't be taken seriously by the actual players of the geopolitical world, and he won't be able to just push people around in the way that he desperately wants to. He will finish his second term as a diminished figure with radically less influence over his own party. Now, whether that means the end of MAGA as it loses its aura, or whether it simply means the rise of people who are prepared to go that one step further, that will become the next big question.